The Iron Throne never looked colder than it did that day, wrapped in shadows and echoing with the silence of fear. Cersei Lannister sat there like a statue of gold and death, her fingers drumming the armrest, her eyes sunken, dark from sleepless nights. There were no more children to soften her heart. Tommen had leapt to his death like a broken dove, and with him went the last thread of her soul. She didn't weep anymore. She didn't feel sorrow. What she felt now was heat, burning, constant. Like wildfire in her veins, they called her queen, but not with love. No songs were sung in her name, no banners waved freely. She had taken the crown not with honor, but with fire. And as the ashes of the Sept of Baelor still stained King's Landing, no one dared to challenge her, not openly at least. But she heard the whispers, in the brothels, in the kitchens, even among her own guards. She's mad, they said. She's worse than the Mad King. And maybe she was. The night before her coronation, Qyburn had brought her a secret. One of his little birds overheard a Targaryen loyalist say the words "Aegon lives." Another pretender, another dragon to threaten her rule. She crushed the parchment in her fist and told Qyburn, "If one more person speaks of dragons, I will give them fire to match." That was the beginning. She started clearing the city like trimming a garden of weeds. The faith militant were gone, burned. The High Septon gone, the Tyrells ashes. Anyone who challenged her rule disappeared, silently or screaming. People vanished from their homes, pulled in the night by faceless men under Qyburn's command. The Red Keep grew quiet. It smelled of fear. Her throne room was cleaned twice a day, yet still stank of smoke. Jaime came back. She thought maybe he'd look at her and still see the woman he loved. Instead, he saw what she had become. She was a queen wrapped in vengeance, her once bright hair now darker, her beauty cold as marble. "Cersei, this isn't you," he told her. She laughed, bitter and cracked. "No, brother, this is exactly me. This is who I've always been. You just didn't want to see it." He tried to reason with her once. Then he threatened to leave. She didn't flinch, didn't beg. She looked at him the way their father once did when dismissing a servant. And when he turned his back to walk away, her voice stopped him. "You'll either kneel, Jaimes, or you'll burn." He didn't turn around. Not that night. The next morning, the fires began. Quietly at first, one rebel cell discovered in Flea, Bottom, set aflame as punishment. Then another. Then rumors spread. Anyone who questioned the queen, even whispered, was found burned in alleys or dragged from their homes. She had discovered the rest of the wildfire, stashed in secret by the Mad King long ago. Qyburn had helped her find it. Now, with the city trembling, she found herself staring out the window of Maegor's holdfast, a wine cup in hand. "Let them call me mad," she whispered. "Let them call me monster. I will be remembered." Outside, the bells tolled. But this time it wasn't for peace, it was for warning. The Queen had declared a new law. No one leaves King's Landing without her permission. The gates were shut, the walls armed, and at the heart of it all, Cersei planned something even darker, an end not just to rebellion, but to hope itself, as her eyes gazed down at the people beneath her tower. A slow smile crept onto her lips. "If they think I'm the Mad Queen," she said softly, "then I will show them madness." The wildfire burned silently beneath the city, sleeping in the tunnels like a beast with closed eyes, until she was ready to wake it. Cersei didn't sleep much now. She didn't need to. The wine kept her numb, and Qyburn's potions took care of the rest. But even in her half-dreaming moments, her mind was alive with fire. She saw herself surrounded by traitors, all of them smiling to her face, all of them holding daggers behind their backs. She trusted no one, not even Jaime anymore, especially not Jaime. The council room was smaller now. Half the chairs sat empty. Lord Tarly was dead. Lord Varys had vanished, probably scuttled back to Dragonstone like the little spider he was. The rest were sycophants, frightened men with no spine and no voice. Only Qyburn remained loyal. He stood to her right like a rotting shadow, whispering secrets and giving her news laced with poison. "My queen," he said one morning, bowing low. "There are murmurs. The North has declared independence again. The Stark girl rules Winterfell, and she has begun sending ravens. Cersei sipped her wine. Let her send birds. When I clip her wings, she'll learn to crawl. Qyburn hesitated. And there is another thing. The Dragon Queen marches, Daenerys Targaryen, with her unsullied and Dothraki savages, and her dragons. There, it was. That cursed name. Her grip tightened on the goblet until it cracked. The red wine spilled over her fingers like blood. Then let her come, Cersei said coldly. I've burned queens before. She ordered the defenses of kings. Landing doubled. The Red Keep was surrounded with scorpions, dragon-killing ballistae forged from black iron. She stationed Lannister soldiers in every alley, every tower. Even the children of the city were watched by her spies. And she had a plan, one darker than anything the Mad King ever dared. There was a map etched into the floor of her chamber, showing every pocket of wildfire buried beneath the city. She stood over it barefoot, tracing the glowing green marks with her toes. If she lands in the city, she told Qyburn, we light it. Every tunnel, every vault, every store. Qyburn raised a brow. That would kill thousands, tens of thousands. Cersei looked at him, and for the first time in weeks her voice trembled, not with fear but with raw, broken resolve. They're mine, she said. They belong to me. If I can't rule them, no one will. Across the sea, Daenerys was coming, furious, grieving with her army and her dragons. Tyrion tried to plead for peace. Jon Snow stood beside her, quiet but firm, urging diplomacy. But Dany didn't care for words anymore. She had heard what happened to the people in the Sept. She had heard the rumors of Cersei's terror. She had lost Missandei, Rhaegal, and Jorah. Her mercy had died with them. She marched toward King's Landing with one thing in mind, justice. But in Cersei's world, justice was just another word for revenge. The people inside the city didn't cheer when Dany approached. They didn't rise up. They were too scared. Cersei had made sure of it. Any who looked skyward too long were dragged away. Anyone with a Targaryen coin, a Stark word, or a hopeful whisper was burned in silence. And still Cersei waited. When the first scout spotted Drogon on the horizon, the bells rang. Not for surrender, not for peace. This time, Cersei rang them. Herself. She wanted Daenerys to come. Let her come through the gates, she said, staring at the map of wildfire. Let her walk into the trap. Let her burn, and let them all burn with her. She was no longer queen of the Seven Kingdoms. She was queen of ruins, and deep below the streets green fire stirred in silence, waiting for a spark. Snow swallowed the roads leading to Winterfell, but it couldn't hide the scent of blood. The north was bleeding, and the castle that once stood for honor now pulsed like an infected wound in the heart of the land. Ramsay paced the great hall like a starving animal, restless, teeth clenched, boots thudding against ancient stone. The disappearances had continued. Another guard vanished during the night. A cook had slit her own throat after claiming to see a man with no face standing at the foot of her bed. Ramsay had hanged 2 stable hands just for looking nervous. Fear had always been his weapon, but now it was turning on him. Sansa watched in silence from her place at the long table. She ate little, spoke less. Her face was pale and quiet, but her eyes were no longer hollow. She wasn't afraid of him anymore. He noticed it too. Speak, he growled at her one morning, gripping her wrist hard enough to bruise. Say something, wife. She looked at him, slow and steady, then said, You're losing. The words were soft, barely a whisper, but they cut deeper than any blade. He struck her, hard. The room fell into silence, only broken by the crackling hearth. Sansa's cheek swelled red, but she didn't cry. She didn't even blink. She just turned her head slowly back to him, eyes. Steady? You're losing, she repeated. Ramsay didn't sleep that night. He sat by the fire with his hounds, sharpening a dagger, his thoughts pacing like wolves in a trap. Outside, Winterfell groaned beneath the weight of the snow, but the silence was different now, tight, coiled, waiting. The old walls had seen kings rise and fall, but never had they witnessed a rot like this, growing from the inside out. The next morning, a message came by crow. No sigil, no seal, Just a scrap of old parchment. He lives. That was all. Ramsay burned it and flayed, the raven keeper on the spot. But the damage was done. The seed was planted. Who lived? Jon Snow, Stannis, Theon. Ramsay couldn't be sure. And it was that uncertainty that maddened him. He began executing anyone who'd ever worn Stark colors. Smiths, stable boys. Even old Nan's granddaughter, just for humming a song Ramsay didn't recognize. Fear was no longer a blade. It was a fire, and he had lost control of it. That night, the crypts were disturbed. No one heard anything. No one saw. But in the morning, the guards who patrolled the tombs were found, throats slit, eyes missing. And lying across the stone coffin of Lyanna Stark was a wolf pelt soaked in fresh blood. Ramsay saw it and screamed. He tore through the halls like a madman, accusing everyone of betrayal. He struck Maester Tychon in the face with a goblet. He locked 3 of his own men in the kennels to be eaten alive by his dogs, just to send a message to the dead. But the message was already sent, and the north had begun to stir. In Deepwood Motte, the last of the Ironborn garrisons was slaughtered. At Last Hearth, a boy was crowned under a weirwood tree, calling himself the Son of the North. Wildlings had been seen in the forests. The Mormont stopped sending food. The Umbers were silent. Winter was no longer just cold. It was angry. Sansa walked the halls of Winterfell now not like a prisoner, but like a ghost haunting its captor. She knew the tides were turning, and in the shadows of the broken tower someone had returned. He watched the gates. He waited for the right night. He wore black. His face was hard, his eyes were fire, and he was no longer a bastard. The blizzard hit, like vengeance, fast, merciless and blinding. Snow smothered everything. Walls disappeared in white. Torches blew out. Horses froze where they stood. The wind screamed louder than Ramsay's prisoners ever had, but he still stood at the gate, dagger in hand, wrapped in fur and fury. "Come then," he roared into the storm. "Come see what I do to ghosts." No one answered, but someone was already inside. The blizzard was only a distraction. Jon Snow had entered Winterfell through the old tunnels beneath the crypts, passages his father once told him stories of back when honor still lived here. With him were 2 men, Tormund Giantsbane, wildling and warrior, and Harwyn, once of the Brotherhood, now loyal to the name Stark more than any banner. They moved like shadows, cloaked in black, their blades drawn, their hearts carved with purpose. Jon hadn't seen Winterfell in years, but the sight of it burned. It looked the same and yet defiled. The warmth, the spirit, the honor, it was gone. Replaced with cruelty, chains, rotting banners. Even the direwolf sigil had been replaced with a flayed man, blood still dripping in the carvings. Ramsay had turned his home into a monument of pain. But Jon was done running. They reached the great hall unnoticed. Half the guards were drunk, the others missing or dead. The fear Ramsay had instilled in his own men now worked in Jon's favor. They crept toward the tower, toward the room where Jon believed she might be. Sansa, the sister he never truly knew, but whom he'd crossed half the world to find. If she was still alive, she was the last living Stark in Winterfell, and she was the only reason he had returned. Tormund watched the halls with suspicion. "Are you sure she's not already dead?" he muttered. Jon didn't answer. He couldn't. In her chamber, Sansa sat by the fire. The wooden direwolf Rickon had carved clutched in her lap. She hadn't slept. Couldn't. The storm was too loud, and something in her gut twisted tight, like the air itself had changed. Then she heard the knock, not loud, not hurried, just familiar. 3 soft taps, like when they were children, sneaking to the kitchens for stolen bread. She turned slowly, stood, walked to the door, and opened it. For a moment she just stared, and then her breath caught. He was older, sterner, scarred, but it was him. Jon. She stepped forward, reached out like she wasn't sure if he was real. When her fingers touched his chest and felt the warmth of him, she collapsed into his arms. Neither spoke. There were no words that could fit in the space between what they'd lost and what they'd survived. Behind them, Tormund cleared his throat. "Lovely reunion, but we're not alone." He was right. From the far end of the corridor, voices rose. Ramsay had found the broken lock, found the missing keys, found the blood in the snow that didn't belong to his dogs. Jon let go of Sansa and turned, drawing Longclaw. "Take her out," he said to Harwin. "Get her to the crypt. If I don't come back—" "You'll come back," Sansa interrupted. Her voice was steel. Jon nodded once, then he ran. Ramsay met him at the great hall, surrounded by the last of his twisted soldiers. "Well," he grinned, "the bastard returns." Jon raised his sword steady. "Not a bastard anymore." Ramsay chuckled. "What do you think this is? A song? You think you'll kill me, save the girl, free the North? Is that the story in your head, Jon Snow?" Jon said nothing, because it wasn't a story, it was a reckoning. Ramsay charged first, screaming. Not a war cry, a shriek, wild and cracked, like something broken had been rattling in his chest for too long, and finally burst free. He came swinging 2 blades, laughing between clenched teeth, his eyes crazed with hatred. Jon didn't flinch. He moved like the storm outside, cold, fast, merciless. Longclaw met Ramsay's twisted steel with a ringing clash that echoed through the hall like a bell tolling for the dead. Steel sparked. Blood flew. The Boltons had trained Ramsay in the art of cruelty, not war. He fought with rage. Jon fought with purpose. Every strike from Longclaw was measured, clean, and meant to kill, but Ramsay was slippery, a snake in a lord's furs. They circled each other, panting, blood dripping onto the stone. Around them, the last of Ramsay's guards moved to intervene, but Tormund roared from the shadows, axe swinging, cutting one down like timber. Harwin lunged from behind a pillar, taking another through the gut. Chaos exploded. The great hall became a storm of steel and screams. Ramsay slashed Jon's arm, grinning like a child who found a new toy. Still soft snow, still too noble. Jon struck back with the pommel of his sword, cracking Ramsay's jaw. "You talk too much." Their blades met again. Ramsay was faster than expected, but Jon fought with something deeper, something Ramsay couldn't understand. Love, grief, fire. Meanwhile, below the keep, Sansa was running. She'd refused to stay hidden in the crypt. She refused to cower while Jon bled for her. She knew these halls better than Ramsay ever would. She knew the servants' tunnels, the dumbwaiters, the cracks in the stone. She moved like the spirit of the old Stark gods. She was going to end, this one way or another. Back in the hall, Ramsay was tiring. His swings were erratic now, his breathing ragged. He slipped once on a patch of blood, and Jon pressed the advantage, kicking him back. Ramsay stumbled, hit a pillar, coughed blood onto the floor. Jon stood over him, sword raised, chest heaving, but Ramsay laughed. "Even then, go on," he spat. "Kill me. Be like me." Jon hesitated, just for a moment. That was all Ramsay needed. He lunged with a hidden knife from his boot, but another hand stopped him. A soft footstep, a flash of red hair. Sansa. She drove a dagger into Ramsay's side. Not quick, not clean. She twisted it. His eyes widened, not with pain, but disbelief. He looked at her like she wasn't real, like he'd never imagined she could fight back, not his little bird. "Are your dogs," she whispered, voice shaking, "are still hungry?" She shoved him off the blade. Jon stepped back. "Let her have it." Ramsay collapsed, bleeding, breathing hard, still trying to laugh, but it sounded wet now and wrong. Sansa knelt beside him, close, so he'd hear. "You made me a ghost," she said. "Now haunt yourself." Then she stood and left him there. Jon and Sansa walked out of the hall together. Behind them, the hounds began to howl. They didn't need to be told what to do. The banners came down that night, the flayed man burned. And when the wind calmed and the snow stopped falling, the direwolf flew again over Winterfell. But the castle did not sing. It remembered, and so did the North. The North remembered, yes, but it didn't forgive. Ramsay's death had been the beginning, not the end. Word spread faster than fire across dry fields. The bastard of Bolton was dead. Winterfell was reclaimed. The wolves had returned, but with every raven sent, a new storm brewed. The lords and houses who once bent the knee to House Stark didn't. All come running with open arms. Too many had stayed silent under Bolton rule. Too many had traded honor for safety, and some had enjoyed the taste of power in a Starkless north. Jon stood before the hearth of Winterfell, the flames casting flickers across his tired face. He was no longer the bastard, not anymore. The truth of his parentage whispered from Maester's scrolls and dying tongues. It changed everything and nothing all at once. He was Targaryen, but he was raised Stark, and now he was both, and neither. Sansa entered the hall in silence. Her bruises had faded, but what she had endured under Ramsay lingered in her gait, in her eyes. She was not a girl anymore. She was ice and fire, sharpened by survival. "They want to crown you," she said. Jon didn't turn. "I'm not a king." Neither was Robb, until we needed him to be. He looked down at his hands, the same hands that had held Ghost as a pup, the same hands that had buried Ygritte, that had bled at Hardhome, that had struck down Ramsay. Hands made for swords, not crowns. "I didn't come here for a throne," he said quietly. "I came for you." Sansa smiled, just a little. "And now that you've found me?" Jon looked at her, really looked. "Now I stay." But staying came with a cost. The Umbers, the Karstarks, houses that had bent to Bolton rule to survive, sent cold messages, vague apologies. Promises of renewed loyalty. If only the past could be forgotten, Sansa wouldn't forget. "They let me suffer," she said, voice tight. "They sent no aid, they watched." Jon wanted to believe in mercy, in rebuilding, but Winterfell didn't. Rise again by kindness alone. So Sansa took matters into her own hands. She called the bannermen. One by one, she summoned the Lords Declarant, the small folk with long memories, the daughters of House Mormont, the sons of flayed soldiers. And she told them everything, what Ramsay had done, how the North had turned its back on the Starks, how she had bled while they stayed warm behind closed gates. There was no plea for pity, just truth. And truth in the North had a power older than dragons. They rallied, slowly at first, but then louder, proud, angry. Not for Jon, for her, the Lady of Winterfell. She became their voice in a way no king could. Jon watched it unfold from the shadows. He didn't crave the attention. He welcomed the quiet. But there were whispers now. Not just about the Starks returning, but about the South stirring. Crows from the wall brought darker news. The dead were moving again. Wildling scouts had vanished beyond Eastwatch, and in Old Town, the Citadel sent warnings of long winters and strange stars. Peace would not last, but for one brief moment, Winterfell stood whole. The halls were cleaned, the crypts relit, the godswood breathed, and in the quietest hours, Jon would walk the battlements with Ghost padding beside him, looking out over the snow-covered land that raised him. The North was watching, waiting, not for a king, not even for a war, but for what would come next, because something always did. The raven came at dawn, its wings black as coal soaked with sleet, and its scroll sealed in wax bearing the Lion of Lannister. Sansa cracked it open with cold fingers, already bracing for war. Cersei had heard. She knew Winterfell had risen again, knew Ramsay was dead, knew that Jon Snow or Targaryen or whatever name the South had whispered in their poisoned halls was alive and walking beneath a northern banner. And she was not pleased. The message was not a threat. It was worse. An invitation, a summons to King's Landing to discuss allegiance and recognize the proper sovereignty of the Iron Throne. Cersei wanted to see the ghosts of Winterfell dragged in chains, paraded through the capital. Like beaten dogs. Jon read the letter once and burned it in the hearth. No, he said, one word. Steel. But Sansa held onto the ash in her hand, rubbing it between her fingers as if she could feel Cersei's breath in it. She won't stop, Sansa said. She never does. This is only her beginning. Across the sea, whispers came, of another queen with silver hair and dragons of flame. Sansa didn't trust her. Jon wasn't sure if he feared her more than he respected her. But the truth was, no matter how many banners were raised, the North was not ready. And the North was never truly free. Jon called the lords to council beneath the old weirwood tree, its red leaves bleeding into snow. He spoke not as king, not as Targaryen, as a man of the Night's Watch once. He told them what he'd seen beyond the wall, the dead, the rise of things older than kingdoms, of eyes like blue glass and breath like knives. And the wall, the last great shield of the realm, had begun to whisper cracks. "We argue over crowns," Jon said. "But Winter doesn't care who sits on what throne." Some scoffed, others listened. But all of them remembered what it meant to be Northmen. To be forgotten, to be cold, to survive. Still, loyalty was a brittle thing, and it broke that night. A traitor, Lord Dustin, once of Barrowton, slipped letters to the south, names, numbers, routes. He sent them to Cersei, to buy a place at her table, to survive the coming storm by kneeling first. But the Raven didn't make it, because Arya had returned. No one saw her arrive. She came on silent feet, cloaked in shadows, her face calm and strange. Not the Arya they remembered, but something harder. A blade with a name. She found Lord Dustin before the fire could be lit. He never spoke again, and Sansa watched her sister, with quiet awe and a hint of fear. "I don't recognize you," Sansa said that night as they stood by their mother's statue. Arya didn't look at her. "I don't think I've recognized myself in years," but there was still something unbroken between them. They were the last wolves, the pack, and they would stand together, because the final Raven came in black armor, a message carried not by wings, but by breathless men who rode day and night through snow and shadow. The wall has fallen. The north stood still, and Jon looked out across the white fields toward a night that stretched longer than any war Cersei could dream up. The dead were marching. Winter was no longer coming. It was here, and the wolves of Winterfell, though wounded, and few, would bare their teeth once more, together, to the very end.